The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the private dining room, each prism splitting the warm glow into tiny rainbows that danced across the white tablecloth. I could feel a single tear sliding down my cheek before I hastily wiped it away, hoping no one had noticed. The gentle clink of silverware against fine china suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, my heartbeat seemed to echo off the mahogany-paneled walls. "Dinner's not over," he said coldly, "until you tell me why you cried." Alessio Moretti's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of a command that froze everyone at the table. His security detail, 3 men in dark suits positioned strategically around the room, shifted uncomfortably. The waitstaff disappeared like smoke, the heavy door closing with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. I hadn't meant to cry. I hadn't meant for him to see. 3 weeks ago, I was just Emma Carter, a 26-year-old pastry chef working double shifts at Bellissimo, one of Chicago's most exclusive Italian restaurants. My world consisted of pre-dawn alarms, flour-covered aprons, and the constant worry about making rent on my cramped studio apartment. Then he walked in, and everything changed. I still remember the first time I saw Alessio. The restaurant had emptied except for the corner table, his table. Chef Paolo had nervously informed us that Mr. Moretti always had the same table, always after regular hours, always with absolute privacy. I was finishing a trio of tiramisu when Paolo frantically gestured for me to come to the kitchen doors. "He's asking for the pastry chef," he hissed, his accent thickening with anxiety. "You go, now." Through the small window in the swinging door, I caught my first glimpse of him. Broad shoulders draped in a suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary, dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Italian currency. Even seated, he radiated power. 2 bodyguards stood nearby, their eyes constantly scanning the empty restaurant. "I can't," I whispered, suddenly aware of my messy bun, the flour dusting my cheeks, the burn mark on my forearm from an earlier mishap with the oven. "You must," Paolo insisted, already untying my apron. "He owns half this city, including this restaurant. When he asks, we answer." Walking to his table felt like crossing an ocean. My legs trembled beneath me, each step on the plush carpet feeling like quicksand. When I finally reached him, Alessio Moretti looked up, and I felt the air leave my lungs. His eyes were dark, almost black, framed by thick lashes that any woman would envy. A day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, giving him a dangerous edge that made my skin tingle with warning. "This tiramisu," he said, his voice a low rumble accented with the remnants of his Italian heritage, "is different from what I usually receive here." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry if it's not to your liking, sir. I can prepare something else. I didn't say I disliked it." His lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "It reminds me of how my grandmother made it in Florence. Less sugar, more espresso, bold." "Thank you," I managed, unable to look away from his gaze. "You're new." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. 6 months, sir." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded toward the chair across from him. "Sit." I hesitated, glancing back at the kitchen where Paolo was frantically gesturing for me to comply. "I don't bite," Alessio said, amusement flickering in his eyes, "unless provoked." That night, I sat across from the most powerful man in Chicago as he asked me questions about pastry, about techniques, about my training. He listened with unsettling intensity, as if my opinions on the proper way to fold laminated dough were somehow vital intelligence. When I finally escaped back to the kitchen, my heart was racing, and I couldn't explain why. The next night, he returned, and the next. Always after closing, always requesting me personally. Within a week, our conversations had expanded beyond pastry to books, art, my childhood in a small Michigan town. He revealed little about himself, but I gathered enough. Orphaned young, raised by his grandmother in Italy, moved to America as a teenager. The whispers among the staff filled in what he didn't say. Heir to the Moretti crime family, took control at 25 after his uncle's mysterious death. Ruthless in business, lethal to enemies. I told myself I was imagining the way his eyes followed me, the way his fingers occasionally brushed mine when I served him dessert. I convinced myself that the expensive box of French vanilla beans that appeared in the kitchen with my name was simply appreciation for a restaurant employee. Then came the night I accidentally dropped a plate, shattering it at his feet. I knelt immediately to clean it up, apologizing profusely. As I gathered the larger pieces, a shard sliced across my palm, drawing blood. Before I could react, he was kneeling beside me, taking my hand in his much larger one, pressing a pristine handkerchief against the cut. "Careful, Piccola," he murmured, his thumb stroking the inside of my wrist. "Precious things should be handled with care." The next morning, a man in a black suit appeared at my apartment door. "Mr. Moretti requests your presence for dinner," he said, handing me an envelope containing an address and a time, not a request, a summons. I shouldn't have gone. Every instinct told me to run in the opposite direction, but curiosity, or something deeper, pulled me to the address, a sleek high-rise overlooking the lake. The penthouse, of course. Dinner that night was prepared by a private chef in his sprawling apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist Italian furniture. Alessio watched me over candlelight, asking questions, drawing me out, making me laugh despite my nervousness. When his phone buzzed, he checked it with a frown. "Business," he said, standing. "Excuse me for a moment." While he stepped into another room, I wandered to the windows, gazing out at the twinkling lights of Chicago spread below us. The city looked different from up here, smaller, controllable, like a toy set that could be rearranged on a whim. "Beautiful, isn't it?" His voice came from directly behind me, startling me. "Yes," I managed, acutely aware of his proximity, the heat of his body just inches from mine. "I could give it all to you," he said softly, his breath warm against my ear. "Anything you want, Emma. You need only ask." I turned to face him, finding myself trapped between the cold glass and his warm body. "Why me?" I whispered. "I'm nobody." His smile was predatory, possessive. "You're not nobody. You just don't know it yet." That night marked the beginning. Expensive gifts appeared daily. Jewelry, designer clothes, a key to a new apartment in his building. When I protested, tried to return them, his expression darkened. "It pleases me to give you these things," he said, voice tight with controlled anger. "Do not deny me that pleasure." Gradually, I found my life being absorbed into his. My shifts at the restaurant were reduced, then eliminated. "You're too talented to work for others," he insisted. My friends' calls went unanswered as I spent more time in his world. Charity galas, exclusive restaurants, weekends at his lake house. When I mentioned visiting my parents, his jaw tightened. "Not now," he said. "It's not safe." "Not safe?" "They're my parents, Alessio. There are people who would use anyone I care about against me," he explained, cupping my face in his hands. "Until I'm certain they're protected, you stay where I can see you." I should have been frightened, should have seen the red flags. Instead, I was intrigued, flattered by his attention, seduced by his intensity, the way his eyes darkened when another man spoke to me, the possessive hand he kept on the small of my back, the expensive security detail that appeared when he couldn't be with me personally. All of it made me feel valued in a way I'd never experienced. That was before I learned the truth. Now, sitting in the private dining room of the city's most exclusive restaurant, I felt the weight of his stare as he waited for my answer. The tear had been involuntary, triggered by a text message I'd received under the table. A warning from the only friend who still tried to reach me. "Emma, you need to know who he really is. What he did to Michael. Please meet me. I can prove it, Michael." My ex-boyfriend who'd disappeared 3 months ago, shortly before I met Alessio. The police called it a missing persons case gone cold. I'd always assumed he'd simply left town after our breakup. "I asked you a question, Emma." Alessio's voice cut through my thoughts, sharper now. His handsome face was composed, but I knew him well enough to see the tension in his jaw, the dangerous glint in his eyes. "It's nothing," I lied, forcing a smile. "I just remembered something sad from a book I was reading." His expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened around the stem of his wineglass until I feared it might snap. With deliberate care, he set it down and nodded to his security team. "Leave us." The men exited without hesitation, leaving us alone in the cavernous dining room. Alessio rose from his chair with fluid grace, moving around the table until he stood beside me, With gentle fingers that belied the steel in his voice, he tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze. 6 weeks I have known you, Emma, he said softly. In that time, I have given you everything. My time, my protection, my trust. The one thing I cannot abide is lies. His phone appeared in his other hand, the screen illuminated with a text. My text, the one from my friend. My blood turned to ice. Your phone, I whispered. How did you... Everything that is yours is mine to protect, he said simply, including your communications. You've been monitoring my phone? I pulled away from his touch, anger momentarily overcoming fear. That's invasion of privacy, Alessio. You can't just... I can do whatever is necessary to keep what's mine safe. His voice remained calm, reasonable, as if explaining something to a child. Now, tell me about Michael. The name on his lips sent a shiver down my spine. He was my boyfriend. We broke up 3 months ago. He left town. Did he? Alessio raised an eyebrow. Or did he disappear? The way he emphasized the word made my stomach clench. What are you saying? He sighed, returning to his seat and gesturing for me to remain in mine. I had hoped to wait before having this conversation, but it seems your friend has forced my hand. What conversation? About who I am, Emma. About who you're with. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. I know who you are. His laugh was without humor. You know what I've allowed you to see. He took a sip of wine, his eyes never leaving mine. Your Michael was a thief, Piccola. He stole from me, a considerable sum. When confronted, he attempted to bargain with information about you. My mind reeled. That's impossible. Michael was an accountant. He wouldn't... For the Berlucci family, Alessio cut in. My rivals. He was their plant, embedded in one of my legitimate businesses. And when caught, he offered you as a distraction. No, I whispered, the room spinning around me. That can't be true. He showed me your picture, Alessio continued relentlessly. Told me you worked at Bellissimo, suggested I might find you entertaining. A peace offering, he called it. The nausea rose in my throat. And so what, you decided to check out his girlfriend? For entertainment? I decided to see for myself what kind of woman would be with a man like that. He corrected. I intended one meeting, perhaps to gather information. I did not expect... He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face before disappearing. I did not expect you. What happened to him? I asked, dreading the answer. Alessio's expression revealed nothing. He's alive, if that's your concern. Relocated with a new identity, after repaying his debt. Relief flooded me, quickly replaced by confusion. Then why would my friend say, because Sofia Berlucci would say anything to get you away from me? He interrupted. She's not your friend, Emma. She's the daughter of my enemy, trying to use you as her father once tried to use Michael. My mind raced as I processed Alessio's words. The name Berlucci hung in the air between us. A family I'd heard whispered about, even in the kitchen of Bellissimo. Rivals to the Moretti Empire, equally powerful and twice as ruthless. And Sofia, my friend from culinary school, was their daughter? It seemed impossible. I don't believe you, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Sofia has been my friend for years. She wouldn't... Check your phone, Alessio said, sliding it across the table toward me. Her real number, not the one she's been texting you from recently. With trembling fingers, I opened my contacts and found Sofia's entry. The number was different from the texts I'd been receiving this past week. I looked up at Alessio, confusion clouding my thoughts. The Berluccis have been trying to infiltrate my organization for years, he explained, his voice softening slightly. When Michael failed, they moved to their next option, you. Me? I'm nobody. I'm just a pastry chef. You are the woman I care about, he said simply, as if that explained everything. And in his world, perhaps it did. The restaurant around us had grown quiet, the staff gone, the security team waiting somewhere beyond the heavy doors. It was just us now, the candles burning lower, casting dancing shadows across Alessio's sharp features. So everything between us has been a lie? I asked, the pain in my chest surprising me with its intensity. You only approached me because of Michael? Because of some mob war? Alessio's expression darkened, and he leaned forward, his presence suddenly filling the room like a gathering storm. "Do not insult what is between us," he said, each word precise and dangerous. "Yes, I approached you because of circumstances, but everything since, every moment, every touch, every gift, that was my choice. Because I wanted you. Because something in you calls to something in me." He stood suddenly, moving to my side of the table and pulling my chair out. Taking my hand, he guided me to my feet until we stood inches apart, his dark eyes boring into mine. "Come with me," he said. Not a request, but not quite a command either. "There is something you need to see." Outside the restaurant, his sleek black Bentley waited, the driver opening doors as soon as we appeared. Alessio kept his hand on the small of my back, guiding me with the possessive touch I'd grown accustomed to. Once inside the car's plush interior, he drew me against his side, his arm heavy across my shoulders. "Where are we going?" I asked, watching the glittering Chicago skyline slide past the tinted windows. "To see the truth," he answered cryptically, his attention divided between me and the series of texts appearing on his phone. He fired off rapid responses, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency before he tucked the phone away and returned his full attention to me. "You deserve to know exactly who and what I am before you decide." "Decide what?" His smile was both tender and predatory. "Whether to stay." The car turned onto Lakeshore Drive, then down a series of increasingly industrial streets until we reached the harbor. Security vehicles flanked us, peeling off to create a perimeter as our car stopped near a warehouse. Alessio exited first, scanning the area before offering his hand to help me out. The night air carried the scent of the lake, cool and damp against my skin. "Stay close to me," he murmured, his arm wrapping possessively around my waist as he guided me toward the warehouse. "No matter what you see or hear, remember you are under my protection. No one will harm you." The warehouse interior was brightly lit and surprisingly clean. Men in suits nodded respectfully as Alessio passed, their eyes curiously taking in my presence before quickly looking away. We walked through a main area filled with shipping containers and forklifts, then through a heavy metal door that led to a hallway of offices. At the end of the corridor, 2 guards stood outside a door. They stepped aside immediately, one opening the door for us. Inside was a simple room with concrete floors and metal chairs. In the center sat Sophia, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her expensive clothes wrinkled. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes widened. "Emma!" She tried to stand, but was gently pressed back into her seat by one of Alessio's men. "Thank God. You need to run. He's—" "Careful of your next words, Ms. Berlucci," Alessio interrupted, his voice deceptively calm. "I've brought Emma here so she can hear the truth from your lips. No more games." Sophia's eyes darted between us, calculation replacing her initial panic. "Emma, whatever he's told you—" "The truth, Sophia," I cut in, surprised by my own steadiness. "Were you really my friend all these years? Or was I just positioned? Like Michael?" Something flickered across her face. Guilt, perhaps. "It wasn't like that in the beginning," she said finally. "We were friends. Real friends. But when my father found out you were dating Michael—" "He saw an opportunity," Alessio finished for her. "Tell her the rest." Sophia's shoulders slumped. "Michael was already working for my family. Dating you was convenient. A backup plan. If he got caught, you were his insurance policy." The room tilted slightly, and I felt Alessio's hand steady me at the small of my back. "And after Michael disappeared?" I asked, dreading the answer. "I was supposed to get close again, convince you Moretti was dangerous. My father thought—" She hesitated, glancing nervously at Alessio. "He thought if we could turn you against him, make you leave him publicly, it would weaken his position." "How would that weaken anything?" I asked, genuinely confused. Alessio's laugh held no humor. "Because, Piccola, in our world, a man who cannot protect what he values most is seen as vulnerable. If the woman I've claimed so publicly were to leave me, especially out of fear—" He shrugged. "It creates an impression of weakness others might exploit." My head was spinning with implications. "So I'm what? A pawn? A trophy to be fought over?" To them, yes, Alessio said, his voice hardening. To me, never. I turned to face him fully, searching his expression for any hint of deception. And Michael, is he really alive? Something dangerous flashed in Alessio's eyes. Would you prefer he wasn't? Of course not. I just want the truth. He nodded to one of his men, who produced a tablet and pulled up a video feed. On the screen was Michael, alive and apparently unharmed, sitting at a cafe table somewhere sunny. The timestamp on the footage showed it was from earlier that day. He works for me now, Alessio explained. From a safe distance. His financial skills are useful, and he has motivation to remain loyal. Relief washed over me, quickly replaced by a new wave of betrayal. Michael had been part of this all along, using our relationship as cover for whatever criminal activities he was involved in. Had anything in my life these past months been real? As if reading my thoughts, Alessio turned to Sophia. You've served your purpose. My men will escort you back to your father with a message. Emma is mine now. Any further attempts to interfere will be met with consequences neither of you will survive. Sophia's face paled, but she managed a defiant lift of her chin. He won't stop. You know that. Then he's a fool, Alessio replied coldly, and fools in our business don't live long. He turned to me, his expression softening marginally. Wait for me in the car, Tesoro. This conversation is no longer for your ears. Part of me wanted to protest, to demand to stay, but the look in his eyes brooked no argument. I allowed one of his security men to escort me back to the waiting Bentley, my mind reeling with everything I'd learned. Inside the car, I watched the warehouse through the tinted windows, half expecting to hear gunshots or screams. Instead, 10 minutes later, Alessio emerged alone, his face composed as he walked unhurriedly to the car. When he slid in beside me, I caught the scent of his cologne mingled with something metallic. Is she? I couldn't finish the question. Alive and unharmed, he assured me, taking my cold hands in his warm ones. Despite what you may think of me, Emma, I don't kill women, especially not ones who might still serve a purpose. What purpose? Her father will be more careful now that he knows I have proof of his scheme. It buys us time. The car pulled away from the harbor, melting back into the Chicago traffic. Alessio kept hold of my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm in a gesture that should have been soothing, but only heightened my awareness of how dangerous the man beside me truly was. Take me home, I said quietly, staring out at the city lights. Emma, my home, I clarified. My old apartment. I need time to think. His jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath the skin. It's not safe. It was safe enough 3 weeks ago, I countered. That was before Berlucci knew you were important to me. Alessio shifted in the seat to face me fully, his dark eyes intense in the dim light of the car. I understand you need space to process everything, but I will not compromise your safety, not even for your comfort. Before I could argue, he pressed a button on the car's console. Take us to the penthouse, he instructed the driver, then turned back to me. You can have the guest wing to yourself. I won't intrude, but you will stay where I can ensure your protection. The quiet authority in his voice should have angered me. Who was he to decide where I could go? But exhaustion and emotional overload were taking their toll. I leaned back against the leather seat, suddenly too tired to fight. Fine, I conceded, but this doesn't mean I'm staying permanently. I need to figure out what all of this means. What I want. Fair enough. His relief was palpable, though he tried to hide it. Whatever you decide, know this. Everything I've done has been to protect you, even from truths I knew would hurt you. We rode the rest of the way in silence, the city lights blurring through my tears. By the time we reached his building, I had composed myself, determined to maintain whatever dignity I had left. The penthouse was exactly as I remembered. Sleek, minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city spread below like a carpet of stars. Alessio instructed his staff to prepare the guest wing, then turned to me. Are you hungry? He asked. Our dinner was interrupted. The thought of food made my stomach turn. No, I just want to sleep. He nodded, then surprised me by keeping his distance, not touching me as he usually would. If you need anything at all, you have only to ask. My security team will be outside your door all night. To keep me in or others out, I challenged. His smile held a hint of sadness. You are not a prisoner, Emma. The door locks from the inside. You have my word. Left alone in the luxurious guest suite, I peeled off my dress, one of many he'd given me, I realized with a pang, and stood under the shower until the water ran cold, as if I could wash away the events of the evening. Wrapped in a plush robe, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out at the Chicago skyline. My old life seemed a million miles away, a distant memory of a different person. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows I'd forgotten to cover. For a moment, I was disoriented, until the events of the previous night came rushing back. I sat up, finding a neatly folded stack of my clothes on a nearby chair, clothes from my old apartment. Dressing quickly, I ventured into the main living area, half expecting to find Alessio waiting. Instead, I found a note on the kitchen counter, written in his precise handwriting. Emma, business requires my attention this morning. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Georgia will drive you anywhere you wish to go, though I hope you'll consider staying until we can speak again. There are matters still unresolved between us. Whatever you decide, know that you are the unexpected light in a life long accustomed to darkness. I traced my fingers over the words, trying to reconcile the man who wrote them with the cold, dangerous figure from last night. The man who had threatened Sophia with such casual menace, who had somehow coerced or blackmailed Michael into working for him, who had men stationed outside my door while I slept. The same man who looked at me as if I were precious, who remembered how I took my coffee, who played Debussy on the piano when he thought I was asleep because he knew I loved it. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. Opening it cautiously, I found a young woman with a tray of fresh pastries and coffee. Mr. Moretti asked that these be delivered when you woke, she explained, setting the tray on the counter. He also wanted me to give you this. She handed me a small velvet box and discreetly withdrew, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a box I was afraid to open. When I finally worked up the courage, I found not jewelry as I'd expected, but a key. A simple key on a silver chain with a note that read, Your freedom is yours alone to give or withhold. This is to my private lake house. No security, no staff. Just peace if you want it. The gesture moved me more than any diamond ever could have. He was offering me space, sanctuary, a place to think without his overwhelming presence. It was the first gift he'd given that asked nothing in return. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Alessio. The choice is yours, Piccola. Stay. Go. Take time at the lake. Whatever you decide, know that my feelings for you were never part of any game or strategy. They are the most real thing in my life. I sank onto a bar stool, coffee forgotten, the key heavy in my palm. The rational part of me knew I should run as far and as fast as possible from this man and his dangerous world. But another part, a part that had awakened under his touch, his gaze, his protection, whispered that I had never felt more alive than I did with him. The question was, could I live with the truth of who he was? Or more terrifyingly, could I live without him? The lake house was exactly as Alessio had described, secluded, peaceful, with nothing but the gentle lapping of water against the shore to disturb the silence. I'd been here for 3 days, wandering the spacious rooms, sitting on the dock with my feet dangling in the cool water, thinking. No security detail shadowed my movements. No staff hovered nearby to attend my needs. For the first time in weeks, I was truly alone with my thoughts. Alessio had kept his word, giving me the space I'd asked for, though his presence lingered in every corner of the house, in the books on the shelves that matched my reading preferences, in the fully stocked kitchen with all my favorite ingredients, in the piano by the window, where I imagined his fingers moving across the keys. He hadn't contacted me since that text, respecting my need for distance. Part of me was grateful, another part ached at the silence. On the 4th morning, I woke to the sound of raindrops pattering against the bedroom windows. The sky hung low and gray over the lake, turning the water a steely blue that matched my mood. I wrapped myself in one of the soft throw blankets from the bed and padded barefoot to the kitchen to make coffee. As the rich aroma filled the air, I gazed out at the rain-swept landscape and made a decision. I couldn't hide here forever, caught between two worlds. It was time to face reality, whatever that might be. I called the driver Alessio had left at my disposal, asking him to take me back to Chicago. As we drove through the misty countryside toward the city, I watched raindrops chase each other down the car window and wondered what awaited me there. The penthouse was quiet when I arrived. No sign of Alessio or his staff. Had he given them all the day off, knowing I might return? Or was he simply out on business? I set my overnight bag down and moved through the familiar space, noticing small changes, fresh flowers in the vases, a new painting on the wall, a stack of cookbooks on the kitchen island that hadn't been there before. I was standing by the windows, watching storm clouds gather over the city, when I heard the elevator doors slide open. I didn't turn around. I knew his footsteps, knew the particular silence that followed him like a shadow. "You came back," Alessio said softly from behind me. Not a question, but a statement tinged with something like relief. I turned to face him. He stood in the center of the living room, still in his suit despite the late hour, his dark hair slightly damp from the rain. His face gave nothing away, but his eyes, those eyes that had haunted my dreams at the lake house, watched me with an intensity that made my heart race. "I came to talk," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "I have questions." He nodded once, shrugging out of his suit jacket and draping it over the back of a chair. "Ask anything. No more secrets." "Who are you, really?" I began. The most fundamental question of all. Not what your business is or what you do. Who are you, Alessio Moretti? Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, that this was my first question rather than demands about his criminal activities. "I am a man who was born into one life and forced to build another," he said after a moment, moving to the bar to pour 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to me before continuing. "My father died when I was 4. My mother when I was 7. My grandmother raised me in Florence until I was 15, when my uncle, my father's brother, brought me to America." He gestured for me to sit, taking the chair opposite mine, keeping a careful distance between us. "My uncle was not a kind man," he continued, his accent thickening slightly with memory. "He had built the Moretti organization in Chicago, taking what had been a small family operation in Italy and turning it into something larger, more violent. He wanted an heir, someone to mold in his image. I was convenient. Did you have a choice?" I asked softly. His smile was bitter. "There is always a choice, Piccola. Mine was between becoming what he wanted or becoming dead. I chose survival." He took a sip of his wine. "By 20, I was running half his operations. By 25, I had taken control of all of them. After his mysterious death," I said, remembering the whispers I'd heard. Alessio's eyes met mine, unflinching. "Yes. A heart attack officially. Very convenient timing. Did you—" I couldn't finish the question. "Have him killed?" Alessio's expression remained neutral. "No, but I did nothing to prevent it when I learned of the plot against him. He had become a liability, reckless, violent beyond necessity. He would have brought everything down eventually." I nodded slowly, processing his words. This was the cold calculation of his world, so foreign to mine. "And now? What kind of organization do you run?" "A diversified one," he replied. "Legitimate businesses, shipping, real estate, restaurants like Bellissimo, and yes, other enterprises, protection, gambling, certain imports that bypass traditional taxation." "Criminal enterprises," I clarified. "By legal definition, yes," he set his glass down, leaning forward. "I won't insult your intelligence by claiming my hands are clean, Emma. I have done things, ordered things done, that would horrify you. But I have limits, lines I will not cross. No drugs, no trafficking of any kind, no violence against innocents. And Michael?" I challenged. "Was he innocent?" Alessio's expression hardened. "He stole $2 million from one of my companies, money that belonged to me and to the families of my employees. When confronted, he offered you as a bargaining chip. No, Emma. Michael was not innocent." I flinched at the coldness in his voice, at the reminder of Michael's betrayal. "So everything between us began because of him. Because of business." Alessio stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back, energy radiating from him like heat. It began that way, yes. I wanted to see this woman he thought would distract me. I was curious, perhaps a little amused by his presumption. He stopped directly in front of me, his dark eyes intense. But the moment I saw you, flower on your cheek, that stubborn set to your chin when Paolo pushed you forward, everything changed. How am I supposed to believe that? I whispered, though something in me already did. He knelt before my chair, bringing us eye to eye, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath but not touching me. Because in my world, Emma, I could have had you brought to me at any time. I could have taken whatever I wanted through force or fear. Instead, I came to you night after night, talking about pastries and books, learning your favorite colors, your dreams, the way your voice changes when you speak of your family. His words washed over me, stirring memories of those early evenings at the restaurant, the gradual way he'd drawn me into his orbit. I didn't plan to care for you, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. It was inconvenient, dangerous even. Caring makes a man vulnerable, and in my position, vulnerability is a luxury I cannot afford. Then why? Because some forces cannot be controlled, he interrupted, finally reaching out to take my hands in his. Not even by men like me, who are accustomed to controlling everything. I looked down at our joined hands, his large and strong, scarred in places from a life I could only imagine. Mine smaller, with burns from ovens and tiny nicks from kitchen knives. Different worlds, different lives. I need to know what happens now, I said quietly. If I stay, if I go. What does either choice mean? Alessio's grip tightened fractionally. If you go, I will ensure your safety from a distance. New identity, new location, enough money to build whatever life you want. The Berluccis will not find you. And you? Would you find me? His jaw worked for a moment before he answered. No. If you choose to leave, I will respect that choice. No matter the cost to me, the thought of never seeing him again created an unexpected hollow in my chest. And if I stay? If you stay, he said carefully, you accept my world, with all its complexities and dangers. You accept my protection, which may sometimes feel confining, but is always for your safety. You accept that there are parts of my business you cannot know, not because I don't trust you, but because that knowledge itself would put you at risk. Would I be a prisoner in a gilded cage? I asked bluntly. His expression softened. No, Emma. You would be my partner, my confidant in all things outside business. Your life would still be yours, your baking, your friends, your family, with adjustments for security, yes, but not prison. Never that. And us? What would we be? Alessio rose to his feet, pulling me gently up with him until we stood inches apart. We would be what we already are. Two people who found each other against impossible odds. Two souls who recognized something essential in each other. He lifted a hand to cup my face, his touch achingly tender. I am not a good man by conventional standards, Emma, but I would be good to you, always. You would want for nothing, not safety, not freedom within reason, and certainly not love. The word hung in the air between us, a declaration he had never made before. I searched his face, looking for any hint of manipulation or deception, but found only raw vulnerability. Perhaps the first time he'd shown it to me completely. I need time, I said finally. Not away this time, but here, with you, to see what this life really means day to day, to make an informed choice. Relief washed over his features. Then time you shall have. Stay here. See how we fit together in this life. If at any point you decide it's not what you want, you need only say the word, and you'd let me go, just like that? His smile held sadness. Not just like that, Piccola. It would break something in me, but yes, I would let you go. The weeks that followed settled into a strange new normal. Alessio included me in the legitimate parts of his life. Dinners with business associates, charity events, meetings with his restaurant managers. He kept his promise about the other parts, disappearing for hours sometimes, but never discussing where he'd been or what he'd done. I found myself rebuilding my own life within the framework of his. I began creating desserts again, testing recipes in his state-of-the-art kitchen. When I mentioned missing the creative work, he arranged for me to consult on the menus at his restaurants, giving me purpose beyond being Alessio Moretti's woman, as I'd heard myself described at events. Security remained a constant presence, but I grew accustomed to the men who shadowed me when I ventured out alone, to the careful sweeps of rooms before I entered, to the protocols that governed our movements. There were moments of frustration, certainly, times when I wanted the spontaneity of my old life, when the weight of always being watched felt suffocating. But there were other moments, too. Mornings waking to Alessio's sleeping form beside me, his face relaxed and younger in repose. Evenings when he would read aloud to me in Italian, his voice wrapping around the beautiful words like silk. The night he took me to the rooftop garden he'd had installed because I'd once mentioned missing growing herbs like I had on my old apartment's fire escape. Through it all, he never pressed me for a final decision. Never tried to influence my choice beyond being himself. Complex, controlled, capable of both terrifying coldness and breathtaking tenderness. Then came the night that changed everything. I was at one of Alessio's restaurants downtown, overseeing the implementation of a new dessert menu. It was late, past closing, and I was alone in the kitchen with just 2 security men waiting discreetly by the exit. Alessio was due to pick me up at 11, after a meeting he'd been vague about. As I boxed up the last of the sample desserts, I heard a commotion from the dining room, raised voices, something heavy falling. Before I could react, the kitchen door burst open, and 3 men I didn't recognize stormed in, guns drawn. "Don't move," the leader barked, his face twisted with contempt. "Moretti's little baker, right? You're coming with us." My security detail was nowhere to be seen. Neutralized, I realized with horror. As the men approached, I backed away until I hit the counter, my hand closing around the first thing I could reach, a heavy rolling pin. "Mr. Berlucci sends his regards," one of them sneered, reaching for my arm. In that moment, survival instinct took over. I swung the rolling pin with all my strength, catching the nearest attacker on the temple. He staggered back, cursing, as the other 2 lunged for me. I fought wildly, knocking over trays and equipment, creating chaos in the tight space of the kitchen. A gunshot cracked the air, and I felt a searing pain across my upper arm. Warm blood soaked through my sleeve as I stumbled backward, cornered now between the industrial ovens with nowhere left to run. The leader raised his gun, aiming directly at me. "Mr. Berlucci wanted you alive, but dead will work too. A message is a message." I closed my eyes, bracing for the impact that never came. Instead, the kitchen door crashed open again, and all hell broke loose. When I opened my eyes, Alessio stood in the doorway, a gun in his hand, and murder in his eyes. Behind him, his security team flooded in, overwhelming my would-be abductors in seconds. But Alessio didn't join the fray. His focus was entirely on me as he crossed the kitchen, holstering his weapon and gathering me carefully into his arms. "Emma," he whispered, his voice ragged as he examined the wound on my arm. "I'm here now. You're safe." The controlled, dangerous man I'd come to know was gone, replaced by someone raw with fear and relief. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed a clean towel to my bleeding arm, his eyes never leaving my face. "I fought back," I said, shock making my voice sound distant and strange. "I hit one of them with a rolling pin." A flash of fierce pride crossed his features. "My brave, impossible woman." He pressed his forehead to mine. "When I got the alert that something was wrong, when I couldn't reach you." He swallowed hard. "I've never been so afraid." As his security team dealt with the attackers, Alessio personally guided me to the waiting car, insisting on having his private doctor meet us at the penthouse rather than risking a hospital. He didn't leave my side as the doctor cleaned and stitched the graze wound, his face a mask of controlled rage that softened only when looking at me. Later, after the doctor had gone and the penthouse was quiet again, Alessio brought me tea in bed, sitting beside me with an uncharacteristic hesitancy. "This is why I wanted you protected," he said quietly. "Why I couldn't bear the thought of you alone in your old apartment. Berlucci has been waiting for an opportunity like tonight." I nodded, understanding now in a way I hadn't before. The security that had sometimes felt stifling was the only thing standing between me and men like those in the kitchen. Alessio's world was dangerous, not just as an abstract concept, but as a tangible reality that had left me bleeding, and could have been much worse. What happens to them? I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. Alessio's expression hardened. They will provide information, then face consequences for touching what is mine. Will you kill them? The question slipped out before I could reconsider. He held my gaze steadily. Do you really want that answer, Emma? I thought for a long moment, then shook my head. No, I don't think I do. Some lines were better left uncrossed, some knowledge better left unshared. He nodded, accepting my choice with respect. This changes things, he said after a while. After tonight, Berlucci will escalate. It's no longer safe for you here in Chicago. Fear gripped me. You're sending me away? No, he said firmly, taking my hands in his. I would never send you away. But I think perhaps it's time we both left, at least for a while. I have properties in other countries, businesses that need attention. We could go to Italy, to the villa where I grew up, or Switzerland, Monaco, anywhere you wish. We? I repeated, catching the significance. If you'll have me, he said, a vulnerability in his voice I rarely heard. If you've made your choice. Looking at him in that moment, the dangerous man who had rushed into a firefight for me, who now sat offering me the world with uncertainty in his eyes, I realized my choice had been made long before tonight. Perhaps from the first moment he'd asked me about tiramisu, and my hands had trembled under his gaze. Yes, I said simply. I choose you, Alessio. Your world, your life, the dangers and the beauty of it. All of it. The tension drained from his shoulders, and he gathered me carefully into his arms, mindful of my injury. You are the bravest person I've ever known, he murmured against my hair, to walk into this life with open eyes, knowing what it is. Not brave, I corrected. Just unable to imagine a life without you in it anymore. He drew back slightly, his dark eyes searching mine. I love you, Emma. Beyond reason, beyond safety, beyond the good sense that has kept me alive all these years. Whatever comes, whatever we face, know that this, what I feel for you, is the truest thing in my life. In that moment, with Chicago glittering beyond the windows and the echo of danger still fresh in my mind, I knew I'd crossed a threshold. There would be no returning to the person I was before. The pastry chef who worried about rent and flour deliveries, who lived in a world where the greatest danger was a burned hand from a hot oven. But as Alessio's arms tightened around me, as his heartbeat steadied beneath my ear, I found I didn't want to go back. This complex, dangerous, beautiful life with him was where I belonged now. Whatever came next, we would face it together. 3 months later, the Italian countryside stretched before us in endless waves of green and gold, vineyards climbing the gentle slopes of hills crowned with cypress trees. The Moretti family villa sat nestled among them, a sprawling stone structure that had stood for centuries, weathering wars and politics and the changing tides of fortune. I stood on the terrace, breathing in the scent of lavender and rosemary from the gardens below, watching the setting sun paint the landscape in hues of amber and rose. My arm had healed, leaving only a thin silver scar to remind me of that night in Chicago, the night that had changed everything. €1 for your thoughts, Alessio's voice came from behind me, followed by the warmth of his body as he wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. Just thinking how different my life is now, I replied, leaning into his embrace. 3 months ago, I was in a kitchen in Chicago. Now I'm in a villa in Tuscany with a man who has business meetings with people whose names I'm not allowed to know. His chuckle vibrated against my back. Not all of my meetings are so mysterious. This morning was simply with the vineyard manager. Very legitimate, I assure you. I turned in his arms to face him, taking in the sight that still made my heart race. Alessio in casual linen pants and a simple button-down shirt, more relaxed than I'd ever seen him in Chicago. Here in Italy, away from the immediate pressures of his American operations, he seemed younger, less burdened. The dangerous edge was still there. It was part of him, ingrained in the vigilant way he scanned rooms, the careful way he planned our movements, but it was tempered by something like peace. The staff says dinner is ready, he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I've asked them to serve it in the garden pavilion tonight. Hand in hand, We walked down the stone steps to the garden level, where a secluded pavilion stood surrounded by olive trees. The table was set with fine china and crystal, candles flickering in the gentle evening breeze. A bottle of wine, from Alessio's own vineyard, was already open and breathing. As we settled into our chairs, the villa's chef personally served the first course, a delicate mushroom risotto that made me close my eyes in pleasure at the first taste. "I've been thinking," Alessio said, watching me with a smile, "about your talents going to waste." I raised an eyebrow. "I've been experimenting in the kitchen almost every day. For us, yes. But you were meant for more than private baking. There's a small pasticceria in the village that's been struggling since old Signor Bianchi retired. His daughter has tried to keep it going, but..." He shrugged. "She lacks your gift. And you just happen to know this because..." His smile was unapologetic. "Because I own the building. Most of the village, actually. Family investments from generations back." I shook my head, still adjusting to the scope of Alessio's holdings, legitimate and otherwise. "So what are you suggesting? That I take over some poor woman's struggling business? I'm suggesting a partnership, investment, mentorship, whatever you wish to call it." He reached across the table for my hand. "You've given up so much to be with me, Emma. Your career, your independence. I don't want you to look back one day and resent those sacrifices." The gesture touched me deeply. Since leaving Chicago, I'd thrown myself into learning Italian cooking from the villa's chef, exploring the local markets, creating new recipes in the massive kitchen. But I'd missed the purpose and pride that came with professional work. "Would it be safe?" I asked, the question that now underscored every decision in our lives. "The situation with Berlucci has been resolved," Alessio said carefully. We both knew what that meant. 2 weeks after our arrival in Italy, news had reached us of Vincent Berlucci's arrest on federal charges, evidence provided by an anonymous source. With him awaiting trial and his organization in disarray, the immediate threat had diminished. Besides, here in the village, everyone has known my family for generations. They are loyal, and they are watchful. I considered his offer, imagining a small shop with my creations in the window, becoming part of this ancient community that had embraced me as Signora Moretti, despite the lack of any formal title. The idea was appealing, a piece of normalcy in our decidedly abnormal life. "I'd like that," I said finally. "Thank you for understanding what I need." His expression softened with tenderness. "I may not always get it right, Piccola, but I will always try to understand you." As we finished our meal, Alessio grew quieter, more contemplative. By the time dessert was served, a traditional panna cotta that the chef had prepared under my direction, he seemed almost nervous, an emotion I'd rarely seen in him. "Is everything okay?" I asked, setting down my spoon. He cleared his throat, reaching into his pocket. "There is something I've been wanting to ask you. Something I've thought about since that night in Chicago when I almost lost you." My heart skipped as he withdrew a small velvet box and set it on the table between us. "I am not a traditional man," he began, his voice lower than usual. "And ours has never been a traditional relationship. But some traditions have value." He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the candlelight and scattered it in prisms across the table, an oval diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum. This was my grandmother's, the only piece of my family history I've ever truly cherished. He stood and came around to my side of the table, kneeling beside my chair in a gesture so unexpected from this proud, powerful man that tears sprang to my eyes. "Emma Carter," he said, taking my hand in his. "You came into my life by chance and stayed by choice. You've seen the worst of my world and still found something in me worth loving. Will you marry me? Become my wife in name as you already are in my heart?" For a moment, I couldn't speak past the emotion tightening my throat. This man who commanded an empire, who struck fear in his enemies, was looking up at me with vulnerability in his dark eyes, awaiting my answer as if his life depended on it. "Yes," I whispered. Then louder, "Yes, Alessio." Relief and joy transformed his face as he slid the ring onto my finger, then rose to pull me into his arms. His kiss was tender at first, then deepened with passion and promise. his hands framing my face as if I were something infinitely precious. "I will spend my life making sure you never regret this choice," he murmured against my lips. Later that night, as we lay tangled together in the massive four-poster bed that had belonged to Moretti men for generations, I traced patterns on Alessio's bare chest, thinking about the journey that had brought us here. "Tell me something real," I said softly, an echo of a game we'd started in Chicago, a way to share truths that mattered. "Something you've never told anyone." He was quiet for so long, I thought he might have fallen asleep. Then, his voice came low in the darkness. "I'm afraid of becoming my uncle." I propped myself up on an elbow to see his face, shadowed in the moonlight streaming through the windows. "What do you mean?" "He wasn't always a monster," Alessio said, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. "My father used to tell stories of their childhood, of my uncle's kindness, his sense of justice. But power changed him. Year by year, decision by decision, he grew harder, colder, until there was nothing left of the boy my father had loved." I laid my palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath my touch. "You're not him, Alessio. I've done things, Emma, ordered things done, necessary things to protect what's mine. But still..." He covered my hand with his own. "Sometimes I look in the mirror and see him looking back at me. The difference is that you're afraid of becoming him," I said quietly. "That fear, that awareness, is what will keep you from following his path." He turned to face me, his expression open in a way it rarely was. "You keep me human, Piccola. Before you, I was becoming exactly what my world demanded. Calculating, ruthless, isolated. You remind me there's more to life than power and control." I leaned down to kiss him softly. "Then I'll keep reminding you. Every day." A distant sound caught his attention, a car on the gravel driveway. In an instant, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by alertness as he sat up, reaching for his phone. "Are we expecting someone?" I asked, already knowing the answer. In our world, unexpected visitors were never welcome. No, he was out of bed in one fluid movement, pulling on pants and retrieving a gun from the bedside drawer. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me." "Alessio." "Please, Emma." His voice was taut with tension. "Just once. Don't argue." I nodded, following him to the door and securing it after he left. Through the window, I could see the glow of headlights in the courtyard below. Then the flash of security lights as Alessio's men mobilized with practiced efficiency. Minutes stretched like hours as I waited, wrapped in a silk robe, straining to hear any sound that might indicate what was happening. When a gentle knock finally came, I approached cautiously. "Emma, it's me." Alessio's voice, calm and controlled. "Everything is fine." I unlocked the door to find him looking more puzzled than alarmed. "What happened? Who was it?" "Sofia Berlucci," he said, the name sending a chill through me. "She came alone, unarmed, asked to speak with you." "With me?" I blinked in surprise. "Why?" "She wouldn't say. Only that it was important and concerned both of us." He studied my face. "You don't have to see her. I can send her away." I considered our options. Sofia had been my friend once, before I knew the truth about her family, about Michael, about the web of deception that had surrounded my life. "No," I decided. "I want to hear what she has to say." Alessio nodded, respecting my choice, though concern lingered in his eyes. "She's in the library. My men have searched her thoroughly. I'll be with you the entire time." 20 minutes later, freshly dressed and with Alessio's steadying presence beside me, I entered the library to find Sofia standing by the fireplace. She looked thinner than I remembered, her designer clothes hanging loosely on her frame, dark circles beneath her eyes. "Emma," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank you for seeing me." "Why are you here, Sofia?" I asked, keeping my distance. "Your father is in federal custody," she finished bitterly, "thanks to information that could only have come from someone within our organization." Her gaze shifted to Alessio, who remained impassive. "You still haven't answered my question," I pressed. She sighed, dropping the pretense of composure. "I came to warn you. My father may be in jail, but he still has loyal men. He's ordered a hit on both of you, blood vengeance for his arrest and humiliation." Alessio's expression didn't change, but I felt him tense beside me. "Why would you betray your family to warn us?" he asked, skepticism evident in his tone. Sophia looked directly at me. Because despite everything, you were my friend, Emma. Real friend. The things my father asked me to do, using you, manipulating you, I've never forgiven myself. And I'm supposed to believe this sudden attack of conscience? Alessio's voice held dangerous skepticism. Believe what you want, Sophia shot back. But my father destroyed our family with his obsession to take you down. My brother is dead because of it. My mother has fled to relatives in Sicily. All I have left is the knowledge that I can choose a different path. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. The Sophia I'd known in culinary school had been a gifted liar, but the woman before me now seemed stripped of pretense, raw with a grief I couldn't doubt. What exactly is this warning? I asked. Who has he sent? Anton Russo and his crew, she replied. 5 men, former special forces. They traced you to Italy 3 weeks ago and have been watching, waiting for an opportunity. Alessio's phone was already in his hand, texting rapid instructions to his security team. How do they plan to make their move? He demanded. They know about the pasticceria in the village, Sophia said, the information causing me to gasp softly. The purchase had only been finalized yesterday. They'll wait until Emma establishes a routine there, then strike when she's most vulnerable. Alessio swore under his breath, his free hand finding mine and squeezing gently. How did you learn this? My father calls me from prison, Sophia explained. He thinks I'm still loyal, still his perfect daughter. He told me himself, gloating about how he would destroy your happiness as you destroyed his freedom. The implications settled heavily between us. If Sophia was telling the truth, she was cutting her last ties to her family, committing a betrayal her father would never forgive. Why should I believe you? Alessio asked again, though I could tell from his tone that he already did. The specificity of her information, the risk she'd taken coming here alone, it rang true. Sophia reached into her pocket, causing Alessio to tense, but she withdrew only a small flash drive. Everything I know about my father's operations, his contacts, his assets the feds haven't frozen, enough to ensure he never leaves prison, never rebuilds. She placed it on the table between us. My final gift to you both, after this, we're even. I looked at Alessio, seeing the calculations running behind his eyes. If you're lying, he began. I'm not, she cut him off. But verify everything. I expect nothing less. There was a momentary standoff, years of family enmity hanging in the air between them. Then Alessio gave a short nod and picked up the flash drive. My men will escort you to the border. After that, I suggest you disappear, permanently. Already planned, she said with a sad smile. She turned to me, hesitating. I am sorry, Emma, for everything. Before I could respond, she was gone, escorted from the room by Alessio's security chief. The silence she left behind felt heavy with unresolved emotion and new danger. Do you believe her? I asked finally. Alessio tucked the flash drive into his pocket. Yes. The information about the pasticceria. That was too specific to be a bluff. He pulled me into his arms, his body tense with controlled anger. But it changes nothing. We're safe here, and we'll deal with Russo and his men before they can make a move. 2 weeks later, life at the villa had transformed. Security was heightened to levels I hadn't seen since Chicago, with armed men patrolling the grounds day and night. The pasticceria purchase was quietly canceled, with Alessio arranging for the struggling business to receive anonymous funding instead. We ventured out only with heavy protection, and never to the same places or on any predictable schedule. Through it all, Alessio was my anchor, protective without being suffocating, honest about the danger without letting fear rule our lives. At night, he held me close, sometimes waking from nightmares I could only imagine, his body tense as if ready for battle even in sleep. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. I came downstairs one morning to find Alessio in his study, speaking in rapid Italian to his security chief. When he saw me, he dismissed the man with a nod. It's done, he said simply, crossing the room to take my hands in his. Russo and his crew have been neutralized. Berlucci's assets are frozen or seized thanks to the information Sophia provided. The threat is over, Piccola. I didn't ask for details. Some boundaries between his world and mine remained, lines I chose not to cross. Instead, I focused on the relief in his eyes, the slight easing of the tension that had been his constant companion. "What happens now?" I asked. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Now we live, Emma. We plan our wedding. We open your pasticceria, yes, the same one, if you still want it. We build our life here, together. And the rest of it? Your business in Chicago, in New York?" The criminal empire he'd inherited and transformed remained an unspoken presence between us. "I have capable lieutenants," he said thoughtfully. "Men who can handle day-to-day operations while I restructure. Focus more on our legitimate interests. Build something I won't be ashamed for our children to inherit someday." The mention of children, a future I'd barely allowed myself to imagine, brought tears to my eyes. "You would do that? Change your entire life?" He cupped my face in his hands, his dark eyes intense with certainty. "For you, for us, for the family we'll build together, yes. I've lived in the shadows long enough, Emma. You've shown me there can be light, even for a man like me." 6 months later, we stood in the garden of the villa, surrounded by a small gathering of Alessio's most trusted associates, and the few friends from my old life who had accepted the invitation. My parents sat in the front row, still somewhat dazed by their daughter's transformation from struggling pastry chef to the wife of an international businessman. They didn't know the full truth about Alessio, and never would, but they had grown to care for him during their visits, won over by his evident devotion to me. As we exchanged vows beneath an arbor draped with white roses, Alessio's eyes never left mine. "I promise to protect you, to cherish you, to walk beside you through whatever life brings," he said, his voice steady and sure. "You found me in darkness and brought me into light. For that alone, I would love you eternally, but you've given me so much more. My heart, my life, my future, they're yours, now and always." When he slipped the ring onto my finger, a simple platinum band to accompany my grandmother's diamond, I felt the completion of a journey that had begun that night in Bellissimo's kitchen, when a dangerous man had asked me about tiramisu and changed my life forever. Our reception lasted well into the night, the villa's gardens lit with thousands of twinkling lights like earthbound stars. As Alessio led me in our first dance, he pulled me close, his lips brushing my ear. "Happy, Mrs. Moretti," he murmured. I smiled up at the complex, dangerous, tender man who had become my husband, more than I ever thought possible. Later, as we stood on the terrace watching our guests depart, Alessio wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "I have one more surprise for you," he said, pressing a set of keys into my palm. "A wedding gift." I looked down at the keys, then back at him questioningly. "The pasticceria," he explained. "It's yours now. Completely yours. The business, the building, in your name only. Your kingdom to rule as you see fit." Alessio. I was speechless, touched beyond words by the significance of his gift. In his world, giving up control of anything was nearly unthinkable. "I want you to have something that's entirely your own," he said quietly. "Something no one, not even me, can take from you. Your talent deserves to be shared with the world." I turned in his arms, wrapping mine around his neck. "Thank you," I whispered, meaning it for far more than just the gift. "For seeing me, for valuing me, for loving me enough to change. There's one more thing," he added, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "The apartment above the shop. I thought perhaps we might use it sometimes. A place just for us, away from security and staff, and the weight of the Moretti name." I raised an eyebrow. The fearsome Alessio Moretti, voluntarily giving up his protection? He laughed, the sound still rare enough to delight me. "Not entirely. The building has excellent security systems. But yes, occasionally I think we both need to remember what it's like to be simply Emma and Alessio. Not an empire, not a legacy, just us." As the moon rose over the Tuscan hills, casting silver light across the ancient stones of our home, I leaned into my husband's embrace, marveling at the journey that had brought me here. From a tearful moment at a dinner table to a life I could never have imagined. All because a dangerous man had once demanded to know why I cried. "I love you," I said simply, the words carrying the weight of everything we'd overcome. Alessio's arms tightened around me, his response a whisper against my hair, and I you, Piccola, until the end of everything, in that moment, with the night wrapped around us like a velvet cloak. I knew with absolute certainty that I had found where I belonged. Not in the safe, ordinary world I'd left behind, but here, in the arms of a complicated man, in a life that would never be simple but would always be extraordinary. Always